where we'll see Jarvis versus Cedric. So, Jake, who do you fancy in this matchup?
So I talked to Jarvis a little bit ahead of the match, and we sort of concluded that Cedric is a slight favorite, but it's certainly close. Jarvis has
Okay.
some key tools like we see in this opening hand with Fulminator Mage
Hmm.
that can disrupt Cedric even in game one, especially in conjunction with a card like Agatha's Soul Cauldron that gets to turn all of your creatures into Fulminator Mages and really disrupt the land heavy plan that Cedric has. But I think in sort of a heads up normal game, I would probably give a little bit of an edge to Amulet Titan just because it's a lot faster and it's good at ignoring the sorts of general interaction that
Right.
the Yawgmoth has, like Orcish Bowmasters or Yawgmoth itself. Neither of those do, I think, a lot to disrupt Cedric's deck just because of how big Primeval Titan is.
For sure. And especially with someone like Cedric, who's been playing a lot of Amulet Titan, being really good at Amulet Titan just ups that win percentage more, right? Because there's nothing more intimidating than playing against like a archetype master of Amulet Titan, just because it's just so nuanced, right?
Yep, you have so many options when you get to search your deck that frequently.
Yeah,
And so the things that separate a good amulet player from a great amulet player are being able to know exactly which sort of card to go get in each scenario.
for sure. So it looks like Jarvis and Cedric are just setting up their lands. Jarvis has kept a very land-heavy hand, but he's hoping to pop off this Fulminate Mage, which is the one-off in his deck, as a hedge against myself, who was on Tron, and then Cedric, who was on Amulet Titan.
Yep, and it looks like with this line Cedric's taking with the Arboreal Grazer, putting that bounce land into play and keeping it in play is going to open up some vulnerability to the Fulminator Mage that Jarvis has.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, and also this Besiege that Jarvis has as well. So if Cedric just draws an Amulet of Vigor, there's a good answer to it there. Um,
Yep.
Yeah, so Cedric
The
can do a few things here. This Azusa's going to probably get out of hand fairly quickly, which is going to make this Fulminator Mage not look as exciting.
It'll be interesting to see how Cedric Phillips decides to sequence the decisions he has access to this turn,
Yeah,
because depending on what he does with this Azusa, he still might not be able to play the One Ring next turn as
yeah,
a good follow up if Jarvis decides to fulminate to use Fulminator to destroy the Cynic Growth Chamber.
yeah. Although this Urza Saga can also just slowly take over a game as well. It's kind of scary if you're in Jarvis's seat, I think.
Yeah, you don't feel good about your spot, but it's
I,
hard to
I
really, I think.
as
I think it's
someone
hard
who
to
was
ask for a lot
Cedric's last
more.
opponent, yeah, it's not a good feeling.
Yeah. I think from Jarvis's seat though, it's hard to ask much more ask for a lot more other than an entirely restructured draw that allows for for Jarvis's own reasonably fast combo kill involving Yawgmoth and a couple of undying creatures. But from here
Absolutely.
we've got a Fulminator Mage and we've got a Dream.
Welcome to Magic 2016. My 5
That's
mages
really
and cracking
interesting
lands.
that
It's a
Jarvis decides to go after the Urza Saga instead of the Cynic Growth Chamber, and here the One Ring is a really big punish for that.
yeah,
In that, right, if you go after the Cynic Growth Chamber instead, then Cedric wouldn't be able to deploy the One Ring this turn, and instead he gets to sort of just ignore what happened with that Fulminator Mage. The One Ring finds him another Growth Chamber, which lets him fill out those land drops with Azusa and set up really cleanly for his last card, which is Primeval Titan.
yeah,
At this point, I think Jarvis needs a lot of help and needs it pretty quickly,
yeah,
especially given that the stage you can't interact with the One Ring.
yeah. Or the Reclamation Sage that is also in Jarvis's deck. The One Ring being indestructible is just to be kind of awkward here to deal with. Um,
Yep.
I can see why Jarvis chose the Urza Saga, because obviously it gets Cedric that Amulet of Vigor, which allows him to quote unquote go off. So I think he was hoping to play the long game, but yeah, the One Ring is just, if not answered, it's just going to take over this game.
Yep, it's so hard, especially the Amulet Titan deck is one of the decks that can sort of use the One Ring a lot more proactively than other One Ring style control decks that we've seen, where the One Ring isn't really being used to draw more ways to interact with your opponent. It's just trying to find those key pieces, your Amulet of Vigors, your Primeval Titans, to accelerate that end game, that overwhelming end game that Amulet can provide.
Absolutely. It's something that Tron does. The reason it runs like 4 copies of the One Ring, it's just a really fantastic draw engine to not only draw into those Tron pieces, but it helps you draw into the other half of the deck that is, your win conditions, so your Ulamogs, your Worm Coils, everything like that.
Absolutely. And here an interesting spot with my personal favorite answer to a One Ring in Orcish Bowmaster. Giving Jarvis a way to interact with this Azusa before Cedric can play his lands for the turn and take advantage of those extra land drops.
Yeah. Orcish Bowmasters. Like, we're just seeing like the best of Lord of the Rings here in this match, what with the One Ring and Orcish Bowmasters.
Two absolute heavy hitters from
Absolutely
from the summer's Hallmark set. It's a very cool thing to exist.
I agree. I'm a big fan of the Universes Beyond stuff, especially something like Lord of the Rings, where it's so on Magic because it's already high fantasy. It's like the perfect collaboration I think you could have with Magic, just because people who love Magic also really like Lord of the Rings. And also, I'm sure you're biased because you won the LTR Pro Tour.
I Orcish Bowmasters has a very special place in my heart.
It is a great card.
But here we see the Primeval Titan has hit the battlefield and things are going to be going pretty south pretty quickly for Jarvis. The decision behind getting these Valakuts here, when Cedric has a Summoner's Pact in hand to be able to go find Dryad of the Elysian Grove, makes it so that it's really easy for Cedric to just use those Valakuts when every land he plays is a mountain thanks to the Dryad, to just machine gun down either all of Jarvis's creatures or Jarvis himself. And in the case of the Golgari Yawgmoth deck, those sometimes are just the same thing. If the Yawgmoth deck just doesn't have any creatures left in play, their deck doesn't really do anything anyway.
Yeah. And this is really good heads-up play from Cedric, just to set up the battlefield with these Valakuts instead of just, going for something else, just to set up this Primeval Titan and chain off. It's just like, nope, Dryad of the Elysian Grove is going to be a really good answer here because, as you rightly say, it just machine guns this board because Yawgmoth is mostly full of low toughness creatures outside of Yawgmoth itself. So these Valakuts are just one-for-oneing, the board.
Ooh, and here's an Amulet of Vigor, which allows Cedric to potentially take a slightly different route and go for a Kessig Wolf Run approach with Amulet, where with the Amulet in play, allowing you to untap the Kessig Wolf Run you found with Primeval Titan's attack trigger, and then use it to make your Titan even bigger than it already is, and it's already kind of giant.
Yep, and you've also got this Micah Synth Gardens that can also copy this Amulet of Vigor if you want another Vigor effect. There's a lot of lines Cedric can just take here. And one merit to playing Amulet Titan, and as someone who is as experienced as Cedric, is just knowing which line to take, because there's just so many ways you can win the game.
Yep. It just goes back to that. Having lots of experience with the deck that you're playing is so rewarding in a format that's as big as Modern is.
Yeah.
And I think we saw some of that in everybody's deck choices in this pod this week, right? I played the deck that I've played the most in Modern. In talking to Jarvis, he had prepped a lot with Golgari Yawgmoth for the regional championships in Denver last month. So lots of people, I know you have some amount of proclivity for Urza's Tower.
Yeah.
So
I've been playing Tron for a long time.
Deciding to go with comfort picks.
Yeah. It wasn't my first pick, but it was my second pick, just because, Violent Outburst got a ban. I think if, no changes, I would have played Living End, and I don't think it would have been. But then again, I think the pod would have been a lot different because I think more people would have probably played Rhinos as well. But
I probably still would have just played Scan.
Yeah, for sure.
But here we're seeing like we said, that Dryad is allowing Cedric to just start mowing down
Yeah.
Jarvis's creatures and almost takes sort of a more controlling approach to the game where he doesn't feel like he needs to end the game right this instant, and instead just sort of take over the game by not letting Jarvis get any traction from him.
Yeah. And making Jarvis use this Call of Calling as well, because the more Cedric machine guns his board, the worse this Call of Calling gets.
Yep,
I don't even know what
absolutely.
you get in this situation. Oh, you just get Yawgmoth, for sure.
Feels
That
like it's usually
survives
oh,
a Valakut trigger, but not two.
yeah. Feels like it's probably the safest approach. You can it looks like maybe we're using it to try to remove this Dryad of Elysian
Yeah.
Grove from the battlefield so that these Valakuts won't actually trigger. Because
Yep.
if the Dryad isn't in play, then none of Cedric's lands are mountains, and the
Yep.
Valakut checks both to trigger in the first place, and once the effect resolves, double checks, do you still have all those mountains in play?
Yeah.
So
Heads
if we
up
had an
play for
advantage bar,
yeah. we Jarvis is slowly pulling back into it, just acknowledging that this Dryad Elysian Grove is gonna kill the board, it's gonna kill Jarvis. Cedric does
yeah,
have a Teleria where so if he happens to get a bounce land, we can be able to do something, get a Summoner's Pact and then play another Dryad.
I mean,
This
we could potentially
does
even see him do that right now, right?
now, yeah. He's thinking about it. Not quite sure. He's thinking about it.
Yeah, because we've got 6. Oh, we're gonna elect
You could draw
to
some
just
cards.
fire off Wandering.
Yeah. Oh, there's your Summoner's Pact. So you can get another Dryad. And then, Jarvis has just sacrificed most of his board to deal with this. So the fact that Cedric can just get another one is kind of backbreaking here.
Yeah.
Amulet Titan is very good at getting the same cards in 100 different ways.
Mm-hmm.
So here
Interesting
we,
decision here from Cedric
yeah, how's it?
to go get a Dryad when you already, or to go get a Summoner's Pact with the Transmute when you already have a Summoner's Pact in hand. I have not played a lot of Amulet Titans, so I'm
Sure.
curious what the use behind having the extra Summoner's Pact still sitting in your hand there is.
Probably wants to fire off a second Titan. Wants to
Eventually.
go in for the kill. It thins out your deck slightly, I guess, as well, if you're just
Eventually,
sifting
yeah.
through for more cards. See what Cedric gets with this Titan trigger. Probably a few bounce lands.
I'm thinking if we go get a Vesuva to copy the Valakut the Molten Pinnacle and another land, that should be 6 Valakut triggers,
Yeah.
which
Should be
is
enough to
a
make
lot of
Jarvis dead.
damage.
Yeah, correctly said. And here
Here
comes
we
all the
go. A
Valakut
lot
triggers.
of yep, and that's gonna
Pew
be
pew
hit.
pew.
Jarvis can't come back from that much damage.
Yeah.
And we,
Yep.
like you said, really heads up play from Cedric to make sure that those Dryads are going to stick around and to only get those Valakut triggers while he can have that backup Dryad in play.
Absolutely. And it was on Jarvis for, not taking out the Simic Growth Chamber when he could, because that led to the casting of the One Ring where Cedric could dig through his deck and find what he needed, and the Dryads and the Summoners packs to win that game.
Certainly a tough spot from
It's
Jarvis, kind of
difficult.
whichever direction he decides to go in, right? Like you said, it's hard to feel good about leaving an Urza Saga in play,
Yeah.
but
So let's see some sideboarding here. So Cedric is bringing in those Storm's Wrath that Cedric mentioned at the top of the stream. A pretty good one against all these low toughness creatures and Yawgmoth, considering it is a X4.
Yep. And meanwhile, from Jarvis' side, we see loading up on Fulminator Mages.
And Force of Vigors, which is also a nice one to bring in against, to deal with that Urza Saga and to deal with the Amulet Vigor.
And speaking of heads up play, right? We keep raving about how good Cedric Phillips is with this Amulet type deck. We see him cutting all of his Urza Sagas to play around things like Force of Vigor and Fulminator Mage and Haywire Might to try and just not let himself get got by it.
Yeah. Very, very heads up play there. Hey then, so we got some opening hands. Cedric's doesn't look too exciting. It's just a bunch of lands and a Dryad.
And meanwhile, I think Jarvis is on a mulligan as well with what looks to be a pretty good opener at this point, right? We have the Delighted Halfling curves into a turn 2 Grist, potentially a turn 2 Fulminator if Jarvis can draw a second black producing land.
We also have Pick Your Poison, which is a pretty nice one. It's a card that can get around the One Ring because it does force you to sacrifice rather than destroy the artifact.
Yep, that's
also deals with Dryad of the Legion Grove because it is an enchantment as well. So that's a nice one there.
It's a nice little backdoor interaction.
Yeah.
Interesting. Here we have the Agatha's Soul Cauldron. It's fantastic in conjunction with Fulminator Mage, allowing you to just keep putting counters on your creatures and turn them into Fulminator Mages, which is a really good way for Jarvis to be able to fight through the explosiveness of the Amulet deck.
Right. What's worse than one Fulminator Mages? Many Fulminator Mages. As a Tron player, it's really terrifying.
Yeah, I get that. I certainly would not want to be playing a land-based deck and have my opponent make everything a Fulminator.
Oof. That would be rough.
So here we see Jarvis has drawn an Ignoble Hierarch, which will next turn let him set up that Fulminator Mage.
Yeah.
We'll have to see if looks like he might be going with an Agatha's Soul Cauldron, which would allow, I think that's a Wall of Roots in the graveyard, which potentially lets him turn his creatures into Wall of Roots.
Which is also pretty good. And considering Cedric's not doing a whole lot here, we're probably going to see this Dryad come down, which is going to get Picked Your Poisoned. And I'm not quite sure how Cedric gets back into this unless he gets some really lucky draws off this One Ring.
Amulet helps. I'm starting to worry if Cedric will manage to get to the One Ring at all. If potentially if Jarvis decides to go Fulminator, blow up your Valakut, then put the Fulminator under the Agatha's Soul Cauldron, turn my bug into a Fulminator, get rid of your Stomping Ground now, and pick your poison your Dryad. Now you're all the way back to only 2 lands in play.
Yeah.
So far off from getting a One Ring.
Just so behind in comparison to last game.
Yep.
Just Grist into Soul Cauldron is just devastating. And here comes every Tron and Amulet Titans player's worst nightmare.
You had mentioned Living End. I played a lot of Living End when Fulminator was still
as did I. I remember I used to play a lot of the old school Jund Living End, and for a minute I played the As Foretold version with Electro Dominance.
Sure.
Just because it wasn't like the best deck, but it was kind of fun to play because it was different. But yeah, I just had a lot of experience with Living End. So going into this event, I was like, Living End just seems like a strong week 1 deck. But then Violent Outburst got banned, so I had to change halfway through testing.
And here we see Cedric just pack it in. He's had enough.
Yeah. Pick Your Poison, picking off the Dryad.
Yeah. Not interested in getting fulminated any longer.
I mean, I can sympathize. I normally let people make sure they like have it. You know, like I make sure like Amulet Titan has the combo, that sort of thing. But I'm not gonna let someone just stone ray me. I will concede. It'll be interesting to see what Cedric brings in on the play here, if he does change anything.
The sagas do become a little bit more impressive because they're more effective at threatening a very fast kill.
Mm,
But but I could certainly still see him deciding to not bring those back in, and that's what we do see mostly
yeah,
as a nod to the strength of pick your poison and force of vigor and all of
yeah.
the good interaction Jarvis has access to.
Hey, this hand seems a lot better from Cedric. You got this Arboreal Grazer that can do some things. You got Summoner's Pact, and you got this Dryad. Also, Jarvis also has the pick your poison to deal with this Dryad once again. It's pretty good
Yep.
for a 1 mana removal spell.
Oh, for sure. I think pick your poison's one of the better inclusions in modern from Murders at Karlov Manor.
Agree. I'm running a couple of copies in Tron just because it just hits so many stuff, so many things, and it just gets around indestructible, which can be a problem at times.
Also gets around hexproof for everyone's favorite 12 mana dragon, Scion of Draco.
Yeah. Oh, what a wild modern time we live in with Scion of
Yeah.
Draco and Halo of the Guild Pact.
Here we're gonna see. I mean, Cedric's doing a really good job of just putting more lands into play, not doing anything exciting with Amulet of Vigor and bounce lands per se, but just Arboreal Grazer, put an extra land into play.
Yeah.
Dryad of the Elysian Grove, put an extra land into play. That's a good recipe for getting to a Titan, just kind of the old-fashioned way, tap 6
Yeah,
lands with my 6 mana creature.
absolutely. All you want to do is just really race to your win condition. Even if, this Dryad does, get picture poisoned and we can't Valakut our way to victory, Cedric can just, play a Titan and just do Titan things like the old school way, as you mentioned.
I mean, I've certainly lost plenty of games where Primeval Titan is just a 6/6 with trample.
It's
That's
enough.
big.
It's enough in a lot of cases. Nothing to, sniff at.
It's interesting. I think we're seeing Jarvis kind of decide: do we want to put the grist into play and hope that a Titan doesn't come out of the woodwork, or do we want to play pick your poison, maybe take it a little bit slower, play Wall of Roots, not get one of those really heavy hitting
Mm,
cards into play that the Golgari Yawgmoth is built to leverage. It'll be interesting to see whether Jarvis wants to play the game a little slower or not.
yeah. See what this Blooming Marsh is tapping here. Looks like I'm gonna go with the Wall of Roots.
Yep.
This
And we're
way you
gonna
can
pick your
just still,
poison.
yeah. Dryad's just too big of a threat. It can just kill you out of nowhere just by doing nothing, basically.
Yep. And here's another Titan, but no sixth land yet for Cedric. And notably, without the Dryad in play, Cedric is still short a green mana.
Yeah,
The Microphone Gardens needs another mana to be able to make green. So even if Cedric draws a lot of lands in his deck next turn, we might still not see Titan come down for another turn or two.
yeah. One downside to Amulet Titan, it tends to run a lot of colorless mana sources, and often they create a color of mana upon entering the battlefield. But sometimes you are just stuck with a load of colorless lands and not being able to do much with it.
And the Doctor is in. Yawgmoth has hit the battlefield, and that's going to give Jarvis lots of options in a similar vein to how Cedric gets lots of options once Primeval Titan comes down.
Yeah,
Lots of modern decks want to capitalize on their one big namesake card that sort of opens up all sorts of lines of play. And unfortunately for Cedric, we see the opposite, right? No land drop, so we're still we're so close to a Primeval Titan, and yet we're still pretty far away.
yeah. Like, even copying this amulet just does nothing. All you have is just this arboreal grazer that's just staring down a Yawgmoth. It's not where you want to be.
No, he's Yawgmoth's kind of scary. Grist
Yeah.
is also scary for both on the battlefield and just general art
Just look
purposes.
at it. There's a big bug.
Looks like we're gonna see Grist come down. Grist and
Yeah.
Yawgmoth work so well together, in part because
Yeah.
Grist fuels Yawgmoth, right? Yawgmoth needs creatures to sacrifice. Grist providing those creatures at very low cost is super valuable and is gonna let Jarvis get a really strong engine going.
Hmm.
Maybe trying to dig to a Fulminator Mage or something to cement. He's ahead, but right, any sort of green source off the top, Primeval Titan comes down, things can run away fast.
Yeah.
And so I think Jarvis is going to look for something like a Fulminator Mage, a Force of Vigor, some way to cement his position. Here we see Haywire Might certainly helps there.
Yeah. Does answer this Amulet of Vigor, but this Amulet of Vigor is also not doing anything right now.
I think we might see Jarvis decide to remove it. There are some considerations to, like, a bounce land off the top would not let Cedric play the Titan next turn unless there is an amulet in play. So I wouldn't be surprised if we see Jarvis decide to remove the amulet just to be extra cautious and cut off some of those draw steps.
Yeah. Another thing, considering, as you rightly said, that Cedric doesn't have this double green for Primeval Titan, he also doesn't have the double green to pay for Summoner's Pact. So the Summoner's Pact is just stuck in his hand right now. Not being able to find anything to get, to help get him out of this. What's looking like a very troublesome situation with this Grist and this Yawgmoth. There's, Jarvis has taken a bunch of game actions, which is what you want to be as the Yawgmoth player.
Absolutely. I think a general rule of thumb in Magic is take more game actions than your opponent.
Yeah. And here comes that Haywire Might. It's probably going to deal with this Amulet of Vigor. Also, it stops from Cedric copying the Amulet of Vigor with Mycosynth Gardens, which allows Cedric to like snowball if he's able to get these bounce lands and get this Primeval Titan in play. So it just removes the worst case of it, like a top deck scenario.
And here I think we're going to see Cedric kind of try and play around that, just make it an amulet now, and that does open up bounce land again as a potential out for making Primeval Titan next turn, because 4 lands in play plus 2 mana from a bounce land off the top does make that magic number 6.
Yeah.
Here we're seeing Jarvis wait until the upkeep to remove it, get some extra value out of those walls of roots before they may end up getting thrown into Yawgmoth for an activation. And there's the bounce play. Very good play once again by Cedric Phillips to give himself that out of bounce land into Titan, into trying to make something happen.
Yeah. A general rule of thumb, it's pretty good to play to get out.
Yep. And it'll be interesting to see how Jarvis responds out, right? You've got lots of options in what you can throw to Yawgmoth, when you can throw it in, what you can put those -1/-1 counters on. And I think, and once again, I am not an expert in either of these decks. It seems to me that this Grist is going to be a key piece of keeping Jarvis in the game, being able to remove the Primeval Titan, provided the Grist can keep 2 counters on it and make it to Jarvis' next turn. Seems like a decent way for Jarvis to recover and get back in the game.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Let's see what Cedric wants to do here. I think Cedric's just taking his time because, of course, Amulet's just such a difficult deck to play. So you just want to be extra sure that the line you're taking is correct, but also just offers the most impact. I think we just need to get this Primeval Titan on board. Not
see
that there's been
where.
much exchange in like life totals. It's just
Yep.
something needs to happen. Because this Yawgmoth could very well just get aggressive at some point as well.
Yeah, the Yawgmoth deck, once it starts drawing cards, it can find things like Orcish Bowmasters that create more than one body in a single
Yeah.
card to really get the Yawgmoth cranking out. You also have Grist ticking up slowly, but threatening an ultimate at some point
Yep.
to burn Cedric out. But here comes Primeval Titan. We'll see what Cedric ultimately decides on. I think step one might be just Valakut, Handwear Battlements, give the Titan haste, give it that attack step. It then
Do it
gets to
again.
threaten the Grist, which is the thing that's threatening the Titan, and get that extra land, get those 2 extra lands out of the deck with Titan to further set up if Cedric's going to need another Titan to close the game out.
Yeah, it turns on this Summoner's Pact as well, which has been dead in his hand for quite a few turns.
Yep.
This means he can find the Titan, he can find the Dryad, he could find whatever he needs. Unfortunately, this Grist is going to stick around, but you do need to threaten it. Because it's probably like, it is the best card in Yawgmoth outside the namesake card. It just does so many powerful things. And it's just a really unique card as well, just in terms of like its passive design.
Yeah, it's
cool.
It's a really clever, like cool use of the Planeswalker card type, which I really appreciate. And it's fun to play. It's so satisfying when you get to naturally mill an insect. That just you feel so smart.
Whenever someone comes to me and like, if I was to explain like Modern Horizons to someone and explain the kind of card that you would expect to see in Modern Horizons, I think Grist is a really good example of that. It just does something slightly different, but it also is really strong within a particular shell.
Yeah, I think Grist is a great example of Modern Horizons cards that are pretty appealing to basically everybody. And here we see the Titans got haste. It's attacking. I can't quite tell who it is attacking, whether that's Jarvis or Grist.
I think it's decided. I think it's decided yet. Okay,
Looks
so
like it's Grist, which I think makes sense. Like we said, Cedric needs to get that off of the table, or else Grist just removes the Titan, and a lot has been done with getting 4 lands into play, but you certainly would rather keep your 6/6 around.
Absolutely, and considering Jarvis just has no cards in hands right now, just unless Jarvis just top deck this another Grist, attacking it just seems a smart way to do it.
Zuva copying Valakut. Once again, Cedric looks like he's setting up a Dryad sort of game where we're going to see him just try and machine gun things down.
Yeah. Try and reduce this board a little bit. They are kind of high toughness though, because these Wall of Roots are 03s and 05s, and this Yawgmoth's a 2/4. So you're gonna need a few triggers to kind of clear everything proper, but you also just want to deal with this Grist.
And here's the double block. Just play it safe on Jarvis's side. Try and make sure this Grist sticks around.
Wall of Roots has done its thing.
It was always one of the cooler parts of Wall of Roots in Yawgmoth is it was really good at blocking Rhino tokens.
Yes.
When that was more of a concern, I guess.
Yeah. Absolutely.
And we could see Cedric fire off the Summoner's Pact now. Dryad gives an extra land drop, and then that would potentially, that would be 6 damage at the Grist.
Yes.
With that extra land drop. That's Cedric is putting on a clinic as far as
oh, for people at home, if you want to learn how to play Amulet Titan, watching Cedric right now is a pretty good place to start.
Him and Dom Harvey.
Oh yeah, Dom Harvey's great.
Looks like Cedric's deciding on which extra land drop to get into play, whether or not we just want to mess with bouncing a land here or not, I think.
Yeah.
But I would be surprised if this grist sticks around.
Yeah, I think that's like high priority for Cedric. Because if the grist does stick around, Jarvis does have to make the decision of does he get rid of the Titan or gets rid of the Dryad. But you want to keep both of them around, right? So
Yep.
it looks
Interesting. And
like
we are seeing
the
Cedric
Yawgmoth.
decide to go after the Yawgmoth instead.
Maybe he's
Did not.
forcing Jarvis to sacrifice, reduce the board that way.
And actually, I think this makes sense, right? We're
Yeah.
seeing removing the card draw engine instead. Grist on its own probably isn't good enough to beat both the Dryad and the Titan. So Cedric's thinking is, so at least from where I'm sitting, Cedric's thinking is removing the Yawgmoth removes Jarvis's or reduces Jarvis's chances at two different answers, which he pretty badly needs because you can't leave the Titan in play and you can't leave the Dryad in play.
Yeah, absolutely. And once again, this is a pretty heads-up play from Cedric. Saying that a lot this afternoon.
I mean, there's the reason he's in the 1-0 bracket and looking like he's on his way to the 2-0 bracket to closing out the pod.
Absolutely. So let's see what Jarvis draws here. Delighted Halfling's not quite what you're looking for.
No, I think we're past the point at which mana dorks are making a big difference.
They do a good job of blocking a Titan return, essentially.
Good, I might put good in quotes there.
Yeah, it's just like
trample's tough.
Yeah.
We're gonna see Jarvis take care of the Titan. And I think that makes sense. You can't let him go get another bounce land and another Tolaria West because those can just turn into another Pact and turn into another Dryad, and then we're right back in the same spot. Whereas leaving the Dryad, you're gonna have to deal with some Valakut triggers, but maybe you can draw another answer off the top and get back in it.
Yeah. Oof, that's a hell of a top deck from Cedric.
Yeah, that's
just play the One Ring, I guess.
One Ring's a good game plan when you're at 20 life and have a Dryad in play.
Yeah. Hell of a top deck for Cedric here.
Here we're gonna see it come down. Probably gonna see Cedric draw before he decides on lands.
Yeah.
And then
Okay, Cedric.
That's a tough one if you're a Jarvis U fan. It is.
Yeah.
These have just been great draws from Cedric over the last draw step into activating the One Ring. Titan and Ring are just going to both be so threatening, in addition to all of the problems Jarvis already faced down.
I think the door is closing very quickly on this game for Jarvis. I don't know how you can come back from a Ring into a Titan with a Dryad in play that's just gonna mow down not only Jarvis's life total, but also the remnants of this board state.
Yep. And looks like Jarvis is gonna have he's got lands in play. We have 4 lands.
He has permanents. He has land permanents. But that's about it.
So what do we think of Amulet closing out this pod? Would that have been what you were expecting looking at the deck lists?
Not necessarily the deck list, but looking at the pilots. Like, I know Cedric's like a ridiculously good player, and if there's one thing to fear is just a very competent Amulet player. So I am not surprised to see Cedric win out this pod. Based on the fact that he's been playing Amulet for a long time, and yeah, I'm not surprised. It's also really good
that.
base ban as well.
Yep.